Captain Midnight.
So recently, J.J. Abrams' long-standing production company, Bad Robot, you probably recognize their logo, announced the closure of its LA headquarters, laying off staff across the board. Basically, it's downsizing a ton and moving to New York as a much smaller operation. And I found myself with a lot of thoughts on this, because I've been following Bad Robot since the early 2000s. For decades, and especially in the mid-2010s, they seem to be at the forefront of entertainment, masters of landing big deals and creating big hits in both film and television, culminating in a massive 2019 deal with Warner Brothers for a reported $250 million with incentives that could have gone a lot higher. That's some crazy money, and it's the kind of deal that feels more and more out of reach in a post-2020 world. So I wanted to talk about Bad Robot and Abrams this week, what this means for the company and for him as a creative force. And maybe most importantly, to Hollywood as a whole, because I think what we're seeing here says just as much about where the studios are as it does about Bad Robot itself. So right off the bat, I'll say I'm not just here to trash Bad Robot or its creator. Sure, we can make
somehow Palpatine returned
jokes all day, and that might be fair, but the fact is, I've enjoyed a lot of Bad Robot productions over the years. Alias, Lost, Mission Impossible 3, Fringe, even the Star Trek movies that I have very mixed feelings on do have their strengths. And I can't picture the story of film, and especially TV, in the last 25 years being told without them. For a good stretch of time there, it felt like Bad Robot understood what audiences wanted from slick genre fiction in a way that set them apart. That does seem to be crumbling, with their most recent show, Duster, getting cancelled last year after a single season. So, what happened? Well, let's go back to when everything seemed to be working. Bad Robot has been around for a little bit longer than I think people expect. J.J. Abrams has been working in Hollywood for decades, writing early 90s movies in different genres, like 1990's Taking Care of Business and 91's Regarding Henry, the latter of which even starred Harrison Ford. What really put him on the map, though, was the TV world, where he co-created the college drama Felicity with future The Batman director Matt Reeves in 1998. In 99, Bad Robot was formed, and for years it would only grow. In 2001, Abrams put it on the map with ABC's Alias. It set the template for what Bad Robot would generally try to do, right up front. The show was, at first glance, a very slick spy thriller, or at least as slick and expensive looking as a spy thriller could be on network TV at the time. But underneath that genre packaging was the same focus on internal character struggles and relationship melodrama that made Felicity a success for the WB. People talk about Abrams' mystery box stuff endlessly now, and yes, that was a big element here too. Like, he was so proud of it, he did do a whole TED Talk on it back in the day. But I think it's this intermingling of the characters' love lives and inner turmoil, combined with the larger-than-life genre elements, that really made Bad Robot's productions stand out. This may seem simple now, but back when episodic television was the norm in American TV, it was rare to, open your pilot with your lead character's fiancé getting murdered. That just wasn't happening in, Law and Order, or, to cite a much older spy show, the original Mission Impossible. Alias had a mix of what you would want from weekly episodic missions, alongside some soapier elements, and a grand ongoing narrative. It didn't always work, but when it did, it definitely made Alias feel really unique. Lost, which Abrams would help develop and direct the pilot of, but never showran himself, was another massive step up for the company. It was a huge hit from the start, and it mostly dispensed with the purely episode of the week structure that people were used to at the time, and leaned into the character drama and the ongoing complex narratives even more than Alias had. Then, in the middle of its run, you also had Tom Cruise handpicking J.J. Abrams for Mission Impossible 3, after being impressed with Alias. Bad Robot had dabbled in movies before, like the underrated Paul Walker, Steve Zahn horror vehicle Joyride, but Abrams successfully directing MI3 brought them to another level, even if it wasn't a Bad Robot production. By the end of 2006, they had far outgrown most of Abrams' fellow TV creator-led production companies, like Joss Whedon's Mutant Enemy, and seemed poised to be a real creative force, even getting to produce all the Mission Impossible movies that followed. And for a long time, that expansion paid off. Cloverfield, love it or hate it, successfully brought the found footage horror formula to a much bigger budget level, creating a new franchise, and for a short time at least, they managed to turn Star Trek into what was perceived to be a cooler brand, with a hit 2009 reboot that mostly satisfied fans, but probably more importantly, to the studio at least, got it to work for a much wider audience than it had appealed to in a very long time. Now, was Star Trek completely successful as a movie? Maybe not. I have a whole other video about that if you want to check out my thoughts on it, but it definitely was to Paramount. Then you had his non-IP movie, Super 8, which kind of kicked off the 80s kids on bike trend in 2011, and made a more than respectable $260 million on a $50 million budget. For a while there, it seemed like Abrams could do no wrong. So it wasn't a huge shock when he was picked to direct Star Wars Return to theaters with The Force Awakens. And its mega success took Bad Robot to an even higher level, where the budgets they could now command dwarfed anything that came before. And while this was going on, they still had some solid hits on TV. Fringe is probably the most notable example here, starting off as a riff on the X-Files and evolving into something else entirely. Fringe was seen as yet another example of Bad Robot having that magic touch when it came to genre storytelling. And even as the shift to streaming was happening, they managed to sneak in one more great show, Person of Interest, which had a successful, if quieter run on CBS starting in 2011. So how did this all go off the rails? I think it was a combination of a few factors. The first, and one I'm sure that many will point to, is a lot of people souring on Abrams as a director in the last 10 years. The Force Awakens was initially received as a jolt of that original trilogy energy that Star Wars needed. Now, with hindsight, it tends to get remembered a lot less fondly, maybe as a empty calorie nostalgia riff with nothing new to bring to the table, and its complete rejection of the prequel trilogy, which seemed like a no-brainer to many back in 2015, now verges on blasphemy for many fans. The debacle that was The Rise of Skywalker also saw Abrams going out on a creative low note, easily his worst movie in my opinion, and he just hasn't directed since. Now, the TV side is where things get more complicated and to me, more interesting. Bad Robot was on the cutting edge of pricey, slick network shows in the 2000s and early 2010s, but what expensive TV meant completely changed after 2013 or so. You look at the sets and costumes of Alias, and I think a lot of people now will probably say it looks cheap. Now, by the standards of the day, it wasn't, but those standards changed. In like 2010, Bad Robot could easily absorb a failed show that didn't really connect, and they did have a few. Like, remember Undercovers? Most probably don't, but they put a lot of money and advertising behind that NBC spy show back in 2010, only to see it go nowhere. The same goes for Revolution, a very disappointing post-apocalyptic NBC drama that was canceled after 2 seasons in 2014. It still had 42 episodes, by the way. TV just used to be a different planet. Now, in the age of streaming, and with the budgets that Bad Robot had kind of graduated into, those kind of pricey failures were devastating in a way that they just weren't back then. And the more you look into it, the clearer it becomes that Bad Robot never quite had that mega hit on streaming that Lost gave them on linear TV. Now, that's not to say they haven't had notable shows. There was 11/22/63, a Stephen King adaptation that was well received on Hulu back in 2016 and has seen a lot of recent interest thanks to landing on Netflix this year. But that is a 10-year-old miniseries. Now, Westworld was close to a phenomenon when season 1 hit back in 2016. This really felt positioned to be the next big thing, a potential breakout in the conversation with like Game of Thrones, with its season finale especially giving it a ton of momentum going into season 2. And then, well, season 2 actually happened. I don't want to be too harsh on Westworld. I actually think those later seasons are a little bit better than they're given credit for. But man, I have rarely seen all the buzz leave a show faster than it did this one. By season 3, it was an afterthought. By 2023, a year after it ended, HBO didn't even care if they had it on its service anymore, and it was kicked to Tubi. I don't even think it's there anymore. Like, I don't know where it is. Now, the showrunners had made crowd-pleasing TV before with Person of Interest and would go on to do it again on Prime Video with Fallout, but they had asked the audience to go in a more cerebral, ponderous direction with Westworld after season 1, and people were just not having it. Now, it didn't seem like all hope was lost. Bad Robot had a respectable horror hit with HBO's Lovecraft Country. Season 2 was apparently in development, no longer based on the book, and then it just never really happened. The reasons why remain a little unclear to me. So for all these buzzworthy shows, the Bad Robot of the streaming era could never seem to land their new Lost. Mega show money was being poured into the company, but mega hit shows were not coming out. And that was if the shows, came out at all, as Bad Robot seemed to have trouble getting anything off the ground and actually into production. The most notorious example here is easy. In 2018, before the Rise of Skywalker, HBO ordered the Abrams show Demi-Monde straight to series without a pilot. This was supposed to be a massive sci-fi epic. By 2022, nothing had been shot, and it apparently would have cost over $200 million, which is more than season 1 of House of the Dragon. I guess it hadn't started out that way, but the budget just kept ballooning and ballooning as the scope of what the show would be took shape. The problem was, 2022 was not 2018. The David Zaslav regime took over at Warner Brothers / HBO that year, and the guy is a cost cutter, at a time when Bad Robot was trying to make some of the most expensive non-IP projects around. That massive deal didn't actually produce much, and what it did result in, like Duster, came and went without making much of an impact. Now, that doesn't mean Bad Robot is dead. Abrams wants to focus on actually directing stuff again. Like I said, it's been years since his last movie, but later in 2026, he has the sci-fi movie The Great Beyond with Jenna Ortega and Glenn Powell. If that's a big hit, it would obviously help Bad Robot in a massive way. On the TV side, I still think there's ways for them to get shows on the air, even if they have to be at a smaller scale than what they've become used to. A show like The Pit has proven that streaming hits can happen even without a massive Stranger Things budget. And there is a show on right now that actually reminds me a lot of a Bad Robot production, but kind of on the cheap. From, which stars Lost Harold Perrineau, really captures everything that Abrams and company of the 2000s excelled at, and that might be a model to look to. Sure, it's not a big hit, but I chalk that up to being on MGM Plus more than anything, and it's had a nice long run by current TV standards. Now, stuff like the planned Justice League Dark in WB's ever-chaotic DC universe are pretty long in their rearview mirror by now. They're just not happening. So I think scaling back and re-establishing what they were good at in the first place could help Bad Robot get through some really tough times. The fact is, they're not alone. Though box office is up this year, the film and TV industry is in a rough spot right now, with a lot of jobs leaving LA. The streaming boom is definitely over, and the mega deals of 2019 probably aren't coming back. I don't think Bad Robot is doomed, but I think they're going to have to figure out a way to make what they do work without the explosive growth and ballooning budgets that they've seen only go up until recently. And if they can do that, I'm really interested to see what it looks like. So in running this channel, I end up in some very old and niche corners of the internet. Old forums, ancient fan wikis, all that stuff. And honestly, there's just no way to trust all of it. That's where this video sponsor comes in, NordVPN. Here's the thing about being a heavy internet user. You're a bigger target. More browsing means more chances to land on a phishing page, click a bad link, or download something that turns out to be more than you bargained for. I think we've all been there. Which is why I use NordVPN's Threat Protection Pro. It works in the background, automatically blocking malicious sites, scanning downloads for malware, and killing sketchy ads. What I didn't know until recently is that it even works when I'm not connected to a VPN server. It's become essential for research, and now there's no way I'm browsing without it. You can get an exclusive NordVPN deal with 4 months free by going to nordvpn.com/captainmidnight or just hitting that link below. That's nordvpn.com/captainmidnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes, too.